Hi everyone, the List Bro here, and we are back again today for another tier list ranking video, and we're gonna be ranking some Star Wars: The Clone Wars episodes. We're gonna do at least season one, try to get to season two if we can. Um, I don't want this video to be too long today, and seasons one and two are the ones I watched the most as a kid anyway. Um, this was a pivotal show in my childhood. I am a huge Star Wars fan, so I'm very excited to present this tier list today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can rank these episodes. Just making sure this is working. Okay, now it's divided up by each season, so we're going to start here with season one. So the very first episode of the series, Ambush. Um, I'm gonna put that in B tier. I think it's a really good episode. One of the only ones in the show about Yoda. Um, I really liked King Katunko. Actually, he was kind of underused in the series. I thought he was a really brave and noble leader, and you don't see too many of those in Star Wars. There's a lot of like more tyrannical leaders and stuff. Um, so I mean, it was cool. Ventress got freaking owned by Yoda, and it was cool for all the action scenes and stuff. And some of the sequences with Yoda were kind of compared to like in Rogue One when Darth Vader just went all out and destroyed some Rebel Alliance members. This episode's also notable for Yoda inspiring the clone troopers and talking about how the Force resides in every living being. So that was some cool stuff. I mean, definitely off the beaten path for what we would see later on in season one. It's a nice little standalone episode. Good start to the series. An episode that isn't that good is Rising Malevolence, which I'm going to put in D. Um, this episode always bored me, even as a kid, probably especially back then. Pretty much the only thing in the episode that's noteworthy is the creation of the malevolence, which is done better in the next two episodes. We don't really see that much of it. It's more centered around Plo Koon and the clones, which, kind of the same sort of message Plo Koon is sending to the clone troopers, that they matter and they're not just, faceless soldiers and that sort of thing. But we already heard that from Yoda in the last episode, so the message isn't quite as resonant. Ahsoka is really bratty in this episode, and I'm not super bothered by immature Ahsoka, but this is probably the worst example of her being annoying here. And the animation's a little bit rough in this episode, and it's really boring and it feels really long. Um, so that's pretty much all I got to say about that one. It's not great. Shadow of Malevolence, kind of the same thing. We're gonna put that in D tier as well. Um, I mean, some of the battle sequences towards the end are pretty cool with the malevolence, but it's just such a nothing episode. It really didn't even need to be here. I mean, Rising Malevolence and Shadow of Malevolence could have been combined into one episode and just cut all the filler out. Ahsoka's a little bit annoying again, and just I don't know. It's such a nothing episode. Um, Destroy Malevolence, however, is a really good episode and saves the arc. Um, the banter with Anakin and Obi-Wan is great throughout the episode, and Padme being intertwined is kind of interesting. Um, Ahsoka's not in this one that much, so it's not that bad. Seeing inside the Malevolence was really cool. I mean, I like the designs of the trains and stuff, and there was some humorous moments. It was also cool to see the whole gang together at the end from the prequel trilogy, which you can see in this picture here. That's kind of like the ending frame of the arc. Um, it was rumored that this was originally going to be the arc that was shown theatrically instead of the one we got in the Clone Wars movie. And honestly, I think that kind of would have been a disaster. Even as a kid, this arc did not really pique my interest. I did like Destroy Malevolence always, but it would not have been suited for the big screen, I don't think. Now, while we're on the topic, because the Clone Wars movie is basically just 3 or 4 episodes that were supposed to be at the beginning of the series. clumped into one for a movie. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, yeah, a lot of the stuff with the Hutts and Rod of the Hutt is just really weird, and but it's a good little introduction to Ahsoka. I mean, the first 20 minutes or so of the movie is really cool with the Battle of Christophsis, and I thought that was really well done. Um, the animation's a little rough. I mean, the Clone Wars was going to get much better, but I thought it was a fine little thing. Maybe nostalgia is a factor for me because I remember it was a big deal when I was a kid that Clone Wars was back, or Star Wars in general was back in theaters, even in an animated form. So I would take the Clone Wars movie over this Malevolence arc overall, to be quite honest. Um, Rookies. Some of you might get mad at me for this. I've had debates with people about this on Reddit before. Rookies is not S tier to me, it is A tier. And the main reason for that is there's not a whole lot of stakes here. It's kind of a filler episode that retroactively became, important. And but Dave Filoni and the crew even admitted at the time that this wasn't like a huge deal, like everyone made it out to be. It's just kind of an isolated story in a similar vein to Ambush. Um, Now, I mean, the trooper's sacrifice, I believe his name was Heavy. That was all done really well. Rex and Cody are a badass team. I still think it's a great episode. There's a lot of action. The commando droids were pretty freaking epic. Um, Another little interesting thing about the episode is I remember Anakin hadn't slept in like 3 days or something because he was like commanding this mission. It just showed his sort of allegiance to the Republic at one time, and how seriously he took his duties as a war general, and just how pivotal Anakin was to the Clone Wars. And seeing all these battles and all of Anakin's milestones and everything he did for the Jedi Order and the Republic as a whole, it makes a little more sense why he was so frustrated at being excluded from the Council. The Clone Wars really gives Anakin's turn context in general. Downfall of a Droid is about Rookies, though. Like I said, it's a good episode, but the stakes feel kind of low. It is not S tier for me. I don't want to diminish what S tier means. S tier is best of the best, but still, I think Rookies is a really good episode, especially for this early on. So, anyways, on to Downfall of a Droid. A lot of people hate this episode. I do not. It is going to get low B tier. Are there some things about it that I don't like? Absolutely. The whole Ganacht character is really dumb, and they should have had a more threatening villain. And this animation design was already used in the Clone Wars movie as some sort of uh like criminal at the bar or something. So, and it wasn't supposed to be the same person, I don't think. The animation is really horrible in this episode, but for me it's kind of interesting to see like how things look unfinished. This is probably the closest glimpse we'll ever get to that. So it's kind of cool for that. But as an episode that aired on Cartoon Network, it really should not have looked this way. But Ahsoka's a little bit obnoxious in this episode too. The whole thing with Goldie, that droid that you see in the picture here, it was so obvious he was a spy. That could have been done a little better, but that's where the negatives end. Some things I really do like about this episode are Anakin's compassion for R2D2. Really good characterization there, showing that he, actually has empathy for not only people but droids as well, unlike the Jedi Order. So it's one of the times we're allowed to sympathize with Anakin and stuff. The battle scene for the first 6 or 7 minutes of the episode is really cool, and the sound effects are great, and the music that was used was really innovative, and we never really heard anything like this again. So I thought the electronic beats and stuff were actually really fitting, and General Grievous seemed really imposing in this episode too. I remember being frightened of him as a kid. Now, they did not handle him perfectly in this series, but I think people would have been a lot more fond of Grievous if he was handled the way he was in this episode. He was made to look like a menace for the most part. Duel of the Droids I liked as well. I'm gonna give it B tier, but a little bit higher. Fun episode. I mean, again, this arc as a whole is kind of inconsequential to the rest of the series, but it shows some good moments with Anakin and Ahsoka. Ahsoka has her first duel with Grievous, and you see just how outmatched she really is. But she uses her quickness and her intelligence to get to escape him, basically. Um, so I mean that's kind of the highlight of the episode. Seeing the two droids at the end battle is kind of funny. I mean R2D2 is a freaking badass, man. Um, so this is just a fun episode, and it gives me a lot of nostalgia for sure. Um, I'm actually probably gonna put down Fall of a Droid in like C tier, because it does have a lot of flaws and it looks like shit. But I do like I enjoy it more than these two. So yeah, maybe C tier is more appropriate because it's not as good as Duel of the Droids, for instance. Bombad Jedi. So 8-year-old me liked this episode. Um, However, these days, not so much. F tier. Now, granted, Jar Jar is not as bad here or as annoying as in The Phantom Menace, but this really just comes across as filler and like it was made for the kiddies, and nothing really significant happens. I mean, Padme's cool. C3PO's kind of just there. It's whatever. The animation looks kind of good though. Like I like the design of Rhodia. Um, I guess the original script for this episode, this came out years later. Quinlan Voss was supposed to be in it, but they didn't have the money apparently to create a new character model, which I think is kind of BS. They already had probably like 50 character models at this point. What's one more? And it's freaking George Lucas's money anyway, who was a multi-billionaire. So I don't know whatever happened to that. Um, so maybe this could have been better if it had that, but as it stands now, for sure, probably one of the worst episodes of the entire series. And it's not even like that bad. It's just to an adult, it's kind of insulting to our intelligence. And I hate that it's connected to this arc because these next two episodes are really good. In fact, Cloak of Darkness is going in A. This is the first episode where Ahsoka became kind of tolerable. A lot of people say it was Storm over Ryloth. I think it was here. I think this is the first time, um, you know, Ahsoka felt like a character that we could relate to and not someone just for the kiddies like before, very early on. Um, the interesting aspect of this episode was adding Luminara Unduli, who previously we knew nothing about really. I mean, maybe some people did. I don't know much about the expanded universe. I mean, some stuff, but not everything. So, Ventress really shines in this episode, maybe more than in any episode in the entire series, or at least while she was a separatist, because like in Ambush, she looked like a little punk. Same in the Clone Wars movie, where here she actually successfully completed her mission. I mean, it was a rare victory for the separatists. That betrayal of that guy, I believe it was Captain Argaius. Um, it wasn't as obvious as the like R3 betrayal. It came right after that, so once again, maybe they could have aired this episode a little later on because it feels like this plot line was already used like really recently. Um, Newt Gunray was kind of funny here. He's voiced by the same guy that voices SpongeBob SquarePants, so that's kind of funny. Um, I like sort of the premise of the episode, how it was the master, in this case Luminara, learning a lesson from the Padawan Ahsoka. I always thought it was really weird though how Anakin wasn't with Ahsoka in this episode, and there's no Barriss Offee. Like, why just this random pairing of Luminara and Ahsoka? I get, I get they had to do it for like plot purposes, but in the continuity of Star Wars, it doesn't really make sense. Either way, this is a great episode. Um, Pretty cool too how like basically the female cast takes the lead here and dominates the episode. It was just fun and different. I liked it. Layer of Grievous is an episode I really liked as a kid and probably would have put in S tier, but these days it's just good. So it's gonna go in like a high B tier. I definitely like Cloak of Darkness a little bit more. Um, After you see it the first time or two, it gets a little repetitive. Like it's a little shocking on first watch seeing the layer of General Grievous, but after that you're kind of over it. Um, I don't know. Grievous looks like a little punk bitch for the most part in this episode. I mean, he could only kill Nadar Veb by cheating, by using his blaster, and then like Kit Fisto owned him. Who I get he's like a Jedi Council member, but to me he just kind of seems like a random Jedi. Grievous should have had no problem at least fighting him to a stalemate. It just seemed like Kit Fisto dominated. I did like Kit Fisto. He showed a lot of personality in this episode. That guy Nadar Veb is very annoying, and I was actually kind of glad when he died. Um, that beast, I think his name was Gore, was not really intimidating, and they could have maybe had a more monstrous creature. Like when you look at his face, it's almost like amusing. There was nothing really intimidating about Gore. The parts were funny where Grievous was arguing with his like little butler droid. So all in all, it's a fun episode, but not nearly as like scary as they intended. Like it gets kind of goofy and campy at certain points. I will say I kind of like the fact that they focused on some lesser known Jedi early in the season with like Plo Koon, Luminara, Kid Fisto, Ayla Sakura, which is coming up soon. So this is kind of the first half of the first 10 out of the 22 in season one, but right after Layer of Grievous, and I remember this vividly because it was a big part of my childhood. They went on like a 4 week break right around Christmas time, so there was no Clone Wars for a while. So this was the last Clone Wars episode, 2008. So we have no S tier episodes yet. Clone Wars was clearly just finding its footing. This was like the first wave of episodes, and I mean, a lot of them are fun, but like I would say you can start watching Clone Wars even in season two, honestly, if you don't want to watch season one. I mean, I like season one. Nostalgia is probably a factor when it comes to that, but it's not essential watching. At least none of these first 10 episodes are, to be honest. Some people say Ambush is if you like Yoda, but that's entirely at your discretion. All right, moving on here, we have Dooku Captured, which is a great episode. I'm putting that in A tier. Um, it's our introduction to Hondo Onaka, who is a hilarious character and just really different for a Star Wars character. Um, just his whole demeanor and arrogance is, I don't know, he's an awesome character. And all the banter with Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Dooku is great, and especially between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan was at his like sarcastic best in this episode. Um, Now I will say this: I remember as a kid being slightly disappointed because the previews had you believing there was going to be this epic showdown between Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Dooku. And that didn't really happen. Um, I kind of like how different the plot became as the episode progressed. And it was interesting seeing Dooku in a really vulnerable position. And some people would dispute like Dooku lost to a bunch of pirates. I do believe Dave Filoni's explanation that like there was 30 of them, he was completely outnumbered. I mean, yes, he could have used the Force and his Sith lightning, but say he even stopped like 15 to 20 of them, someone was going to shoot him, you know? Um, so yeah, definitely a cool little episode. The Gunk in general, I have really mixed feelings on. I'm sure a lot of you agree. It's probably going in D tier. I'd put it ahead of these two episodes, to be honest. I'd say maybe a third of the episode is good because it focuses on Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Dooku. And Dooku is just freaking amazing in this episode. I mean, the way at the end he like force choked one of the pirates and made him shoot the other one. It's fucking spine chilling. And Anakin and Obi-Wan were great in this one too, and I liked having to see them work together. But that's where my enjoyment of the episode ends. This episode has a lot of Jar Jar, and the Jar Jar we get in this episode is worse than in Bombad Jedi because it's not even the original voice actor. Like I could do a better impression of Jar Jar Binks. The voice acting like really throws me off, and he just seems even goofier than ever. And we already had an episode like this with Bombad Jedi, so I don't think I minded as much as a kid. The voice always aggravated me, but and it dominates most of the episode when it really should have been more about Anakin, Obi-Wan, Dooku, and Hondo. Hondo was funny in this episode too, so yeah, high D tier for that one. Jedi Crash, solid episode. Give it like a low B. It's the first 7 to 8 minutes where it's that battle in the sky is really cool and epic, and I like the different setting, how they were fighting like in the daytime and the atmosphere, because we were so used to seeing like space battles at that point. The animation's gorgeous. um I like Ayla Sakura a little bit. She was voiced by the same actress that played Bastila Shan, so that's pretty cool. um this is another good episode for Ahsoka. She has to learn to detach from Anakin, kind of. Which, I mean, the whole Jedi philosophy is really bullshit. How you can't, um, have compassion for others. The Jedi Order is so hypocritical in general. But um, yeah, I mean, we usually don't see Anakin this like vulnerable and weakened. Well, I mean, except for when he got like mutilated on Mustafar. But I'm talking about in this series, Anakin's almost always made to look strong, at least early on. So this was a little bit different in that aspect. This is also the first appearance of the tactical droid, who I love and am very fond of. The tactical droid is hilarious. Defenders of Peace follows that, and it's okay. It's going in C tier. Like a lot of you, I don't really care for the Lerman. I mean, this storyline took a really weird turn. Um, so I mean, the battle scene at the end is pretty cool, where they're just like chopping up many like battle droids, and Ayla Sakura fighting the battle droids was really cool as well. Um, and the antagonist in this episode, General Lockdoor of the Separatist Alliance, was hilarious, and it was great seeing Anakin force choke him at the end. So yeah, all right, little episode, nothing special. I could do without the Lerman's philosophical ramblings, whatever that guy's name was. Trespass, it's going an F for me, a little better than Bombad Jedi. The animation is gorgeous. I love the setting of the planet they were on, but it's not a very good episode. And 8-year-old me would have told you that's because there's no lightsabers in it. These days, I don't really care much about that, but it's more just it's a really boring plot line, and Anakin and Obi-Wan don't do anything. I don't even know why they were there. Um, that chairman guy was insufferable. I'm glad he was killed. I don't even like Senator Chuchi and her being all timid. It just seems like a pointless episode to me. The hidden enemy is our first S tier. Um, this is a personal favorite of mine in the Clone Wars. Um, First of all, we get to see Rex and Cody teaming up again, and that is always fun. D. Bradley Baker is so talented, but that is well documented at this point. Um, yeah, I mean, this episode features the betrayal of one of their troopers, Slick, which I thought was really well done. He actually made some sense at the end with his, you know, treachery and all that. Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting Ventress again was kind of cool. It was nice to see Christophsis again, just like in the movie. But really, the highlight of the episode has to do with the clones and that like interrogation scene that is being pictured here is really cool. Um, and plus, this one is personally important to me because I remember it was the first episode of Clone Wars I saw when I was on a very nostalgic family vacation. So, um, but that has nothing to do with my enjoyment of the episode. I just think it's really well written. Blue Shadow Virus is good. This is an underrated arc in general, and a lot of people shit on it too much. I'm gonna put it in B tier, um, probably ahead of all of these. Dr. Nuvo Vindi is hilarious. That's so over the top. Um, there's some things I can do without. I can do without that pink Gungan, more Jar Jar, which is not great. Some of the battle scenes are pretty cool in the lab, and just the idea of a virus. I mean, it really resonates now more than ever, given everything we've been through with the pandemic and stuff. But yeah, yeah. I mean, just, there's some interesting storylines going on here. Um, it's not the greatest episode. It has its flaws, but I think it's solid. Um, Mystery of a Thousand Moons is even better, and I'm putting that in A tier. That may be an unpopular opinion. I saw somewhere online someone said it was like the epitome of like a Saturday morning cartoon. I have to respectfully disagree with that criticism. To me, the highlight of this episode is the exchange between Anakin and Obi-Wan when they're landing back on Iego, the planet. And one of the most memorable quotes in the entire show when Obi-Wan says to Anakin, oftentimes, um, to take a step forward, you have to take two steps back, or something to that effect. And Anakin just goes, and sometimes all it takes is the will to jump. It just showed the great contrast between their characters and how Obi-Wan is more patient and deliberate with his actions, where Anakin is more impulsive and ready to jump to the rescue without really thinking things through. I think both sort of viewpoints just in life have their merits, and probably a good balance of both is best. But I just think it really exemplified them as a character. And, you know, more great characterization for Anakin as we see he is just in fear of losing Ahsoka and Padme, and was willing to throw caution to the wind to save them. So I think that sort of sentiment is the highlight of the episode. Um, a lot of people didn't like the kid Jabo Hood, but I thought it was an interesting little touch. He kind of reminds me of what Anakin probably would be like at like 12 or 13 or however old the kid was supposed to be. There was some fun banter between Anakin and Obi-Wan, some good moments between Ahsoka and Padme. I just think this is peak Clone Wars, at least as far as season one is concerned, with a lot of, it wasn't too much action, but a lot of good character moments, I feel. All right, Storm over Ryloth. This one's like okay. It's right on the borderline of B, but I'm gonna put it in C tier. I'm sorry, guys. It's not that interesting. I know a lot of you point to it as an important episode in the series, and it kind of is for the purpose of Ahsoka because it's the first time she really failed a mission where it had like ramifications, and she, you know, lost soldiers and that sort of thing, and was very upset by that. It did definitely show progression in Ahsoka as a character, but I mean, look at this like Nemodian antagonist. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking. We never saw him again. I mean, um, early Clone Wars had a habit of doing this, of just throwing the most random villains out there that we never saw again. So we had no like investment in it. A lot of the battle scenes I feel were kind of like redundant and boring at this point because we had already seen this sort of thing like with the Malevolence. So it just felt kind of uncreative in that regard. It's not bad, but like Rising Malevolence, it just seems a little bit boring and monotonous, but it's saved by the like Ahsoka stuff. Innocence of Ryloth is a great episode. I'm actually contemplating putting it in as, but it's not. It's A tier. I will put it ahead of Rookies though. Um, there's a lot to like about this episode. First of all, it's a great showcase for Obi-Wan, and and just who he was as a general and his force powers and stuff. And I like how it was kind of like a small scale mission as opposed to like the big, like grand battles that we've seen in Star Wars. The tactical droid is hilarious in this episode, and it's probably the greatest use of him in the entire show. He has so many memorable quotes from this episode. Um, the whole thing with Waxer and Boyle was really sweet, and with that little girl Numa, and really touching. I really liked that aspect of it and humanizing the clones, and especially I think it was Boyle who was not really keen on having the kid around, but grew to want to protect her and stuff. I thought that was all really compelling stuff, and yeah, it's just a really solid episode. Liberty on Ryloth. I can take or leave this one. I'm gonna put it in C tier as well. It's not bad. It's kind of boring. There's a few. I mean, Mace Windu. This is probably his greatest episode in the Clone Wars, to be honest. Um, I mean, he was a lot of people say he was an asshole, and he was a lot of times. But in this episode, he wasn't. He was really peaceful and diplomatic, but fought when he needed to. I mean, if Mace Windu was more like this, maybe Anakin would have never turned to the dark side. I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch, but um, I don't like Champ Syndulla. I thought he was like a self-righteous jerk for the most part. I mean, I understand he was fighting for his people, but um, and then Orn Frita, I hate him. I hate it any time he's in the show because he's just an annoying, pompous ass. And maybe that's the point, kind of to depict how certain politicians are. The episode is very slow paced. There's only battle scenes in the beginning and the end. And you don't necessarily need battle scenes to make a good episode, but in episodes like this, when it's about like seizing a world, it really should be more like battle oriented, and there's just a really slow middle part that centers around the Jedi trying to convince Champ Syndulla to help them or something like that. I haven't seen it in a while, but it's just kind of whatever, to be honest, as a whole. Hostage Crisis is the best season or best episode in season one for me. I'm gonna put it in S tier. Um, I don't know how many people will agree with that. Um, and some people are mad just because Zero the Hutt was in it. I actually think Zero the Hutt is funny as well, and I understand it's like a stereotype and all that, but I just can't help but chuckle anytime Zero's on the screen. It's just so over the top, um, like in a Nouveau Vindi sort of way. This is one of the best uses of Cad Bane in the entire series. He was freaking scary, and like um, he didn't even need to do that much in the episode. Aura Singh was great. We'll see more of her in season two. That Robinino guy was surprisingly effective. I just love the idea of the bounty hunters, teaming up and stuff. I really wish we saw more missions like that throughout the show, especially because season two is called Rise of the Bounty Hunters. And it kind of was. We'll get to that because I think I am going to rank season two actually in a moment here. But yeah, I mean, some of the moments with Anakin and Padme are really heartwarming too. They feel like a more sincere couple than in the movies where their interactions are really robotic and stuff. Where here, everything feels earnest and like how two people in a relationship would act. So that's refreshing to see. Um, this is basically just a bounty hunter showcase, and I am here for it, man. The Anakin stuff is a little unrealistic, though. I must admit how like just because he didn't have his lightsaber, he couldn't defeat an assassin droid, or he had difficulty doing so. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch. But if you ignore logic and you just enjoy the episode, it is super fun. Maybe more than any other episode in season one. Um, and just that opening sequence with the bounty hunters killing all the Senate guards is, I don't know, I think it's freaking cool. Oh, we're not bad on time, only 35 minutes in. I've been used to making like 2 or 3 hour videos lately, so um, we'll take another look at this at the end, but as of right now, this is my ranking for season 1. I have a feeling my rankings for season 2 will be a little bit higher. Um, but yeah, I would say season 1, it's consistent for the most part. A few episodes I'm not really crazy about, but I'd say the only two like really bad ones are Trespass and Bombad Jedi, and maybe throw Shadow of Malevolence in there just because nothing happens at all. Let's get to season 2 now. Oh, these aren't in order. That's a little bit annoying. I'll figure it out though. Where's episode 1? Alright, Holocron Heist. We'll add an F tier. I don't know if there's even any season 2 episodes in F tier, but we'll add this tier just in case. Holocron Heist, it's kind of like a low C. It's really not that interesting, to be honest. It starts out with that battle on Felucia, and it kind of just retcons Storm over Ryloth, because clearly Ahsoka didn't learn a thing. She's still, like, insisting she can take on a battle she's losing, and soldiers dies as a result of that. So it kind of just renders that episode pointless for me because there really was no character progression like people claim. And then it just consists. Cad Bane didn't really do anything in this episode significant. It was the introduction to Toto 360, so that was kind of amusing. But a lot of the episode is just walking around the Jedi Temple, standing and talking. I mean, it's really not that good of an episode. It's kind of slow paced and a little bit boring. In fact, I might even put it in D. Cargo of Doom, however, is great. I think it deserves an S tier, to be honest. What a turnaround from the last episode, because so Cad Bane was at his best in this episode, just like cunning and ruthless, and the everyone remembers the anti-gravity space battle where everyone's fighting in midair. That was an ambitious thing to pull off this early in the show. Um, Anakin having to choose to open the holocron for the sake of saving Ahsoka was a great touch. This show has been like just incredible character development for Anakin in general. Cad Bane really steals the show here, but there's a lot to enjoy about this. Cool battle scenes, just great stuff. Children of the Force, it's somewhere in between these two. I would say it's a B tier. I mean, it's cool seeing them go back to Rhodia and all the different planets. They even went to Mustafar, so a lot of good callbacks here. Cad Bane was similarly impressive in this episode, maybe not as much as right here, but he did some cool stuff. Not a standout episode, but pretty good overall. Senate Spy, it's decent. I'll give it like a C. I mean, for again, it just like with Hostage Crisis, it shows Anakin and Padme acting realistically and not like robots, like in Attack of the Clones. The arguments are genuine and heartfelt and stuff, and stuff people would actually fight about. Now, granted, we're not in a Star Wars universe, and there's no lightsabers and blasters, but to me this just seems like how people would act. I think they did the dialogue a lot better between those two. um I don't know, I usually don't care about like politics in Star Wars that much, but I just found like the conspiracies with like Rush Clovis and that other Nemodian to be kind of interesting, because this all has to do with like the Death Star plans and stuff, and coordinates on Geonosis. This led to the second battle of Geonosis, so there was a lot of secrecy going on. And I don't really like Rush Clovis per se, but I like what it did for Anakin, how it just awakened that, uh, you know, jealous side of him, which we'll talk about more when we get to season 6, because Clovis comes back later. Um, So yeah, not a bad episode. No action whatsoever. So I think it's a testament to the strength of the writing that they were able to make such a good episode without any lightsabers or blasters. Landing at Point Rain is good. Similar to Rookies, it is not S tier for me. I know some of y'all love it, and I like it quite a bit too. But at the end of the day, it really is just an action episode with no substance. Now, granted, that action is awesome and really compelling visually. Um, the stuff with the flamethrowers and just everything else. Um, I don't like Ki-Adi-Mundi, especially in this show. First of all, the guy voicing him sounds nothing like him. Um, his design's a little weird in the show too, and I just found his inclusion unnecessary. I think it was literally just to show like, hey, look, we have a new character model now. But I think what a lot of people like about this episode is it accurately depicts like war and stuff, and it is called the Clone Wars, so it is cool we saw that. I think Weapons Factory is better. It's also going in A tier because it has more like character development, especially for Ahsoka. I mean, the the notion of her sacrificing her life with Barriss shows just how selfless not only she was, but Barriss was at the time. We know what happened later on, but um, they were fighting for a greater good, and I think that was really exemplified here. Once again, it also showed the difference between Anakin and other Jedi like Luminara, because Anakin never gave up on his apprentice, where you kind of get the impression Luminara did. There's still some really cool action in this episode too. I know a lot of people prefer landing at Point Rain, but I would take this one. Legacy of Terror is an alright little episode, definitely the weakest in the Geonosis arc. I'll put it in B tier. It's still good. I mean, they kind of were going for like a horror movie sort of feel, which I think is kind of compelling. Brain Invaders is S tier for me. I think this is a great end to the Geonosis arc. I mean, more great stuff between Ahsoka and Barriss, and just Ahsoka growing up and realizing what war truly means. Um, a lot of people remember this episode too for Anakin just going full Darth Vader mode and force choking Poggle the Lesser. I mean, that was great too. Um, the stakes were really high here, as uh, Ahsoka or Barriss could have been conceivably killed because um, before this while the show was airing, I should say, no one knew Ahsoka's fate, so she could go at any minute. And you know, some people, I didn't think so, but some people may have bought into the fact she was going to die here, and Barriss too, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think she has an Order 66 scene, so it could have been here that she died, but that didn't happen, of course. So just like with season one, there was like a Christmas break where they went off the air for 4 weeks, so they weren't airing new episodes for that time. So it was only 8 episodes this time around instead of 10. So it comes back. I think I remember this very clearly. It was on New Year's Day in 2010 they came back with Grievous Intrigue and the Deserter. Grievous Intrigue is decent. Maybe give it a low B. It's a good showcase for Grievous. I think even more than Layer of Grievous was. And they really made up for how shitty they treated him in season one, and he felt like a force to be reckoned here. And the duel with him and Obi-Wan was pretty cool. It's mainly an action-oriented episode, but I liked it, so it goes here. The Deserter, it's like C tier. I know a lot of people like this one. I feel like it focused too much on the Cut LaQuaine stuff, whatever that guy's name is. I mean, I get the sentiment and the feeling behind it about him, leaving the clone troopers and not really believing in the cause, but I feel like this could have been established more in a shorter period of time. This episode's kind of boring and slowly paced, but it's not bad by any means. Lightsaber Lost. I liked it as a kid for some reason. Now, this episode feels like just a typical Saturday morning cartoon. It's alright, it's inoffensive, but it really didn't have an impact for me. Putting it in D. I think the Mandalore plot is an awesome episode. It is going in A tier. It's borderline S. This is we talked about a lot about Anakin's characterization, but this shows a different side of Obi-Wan too. Because for the most part in these early seasons to this point, Obi-Wan was just typical Obi-Wan. He's cool, he's there, but we don't really learn a lot about him. Here we do. This was a great tie-in, talking about how he and Qui-Gon spent a year with Satine on Mandalore, and how there was a romantic history there, sort of implied. And pre Vizsla and the Death Watch was really cool. This was the first time we saw the dark saber, and I was really intrigued by that as a kid. I'm like, whoa, what is this? So very memorable for that aspect of it. The chemistry between Obi-Wan and Satine was off the charts. I mean, for two characters we had never seen interact before. Satine wasn't even a character yet. So just a great episode overall. Voyage of Temptation is S tier for me, and probably the best episode we've gotten to at this point. It even more just Obi-Wan and Satine chemistry, like those two together are really something else. The revelation of Tal Merrick being the traitor was genuinely surprising, and um, they made him like really evil. I thought that was executed perfectly. Anakin being the one to kill him in the end falls in line with his character, and it was great stuff. There's some cool battle scenes, but this is just mainly about Obi-Wan and Satine, and just um, the love story is captivating, and you usually don't say that in Star Wars. Usually in Star Wars, the love stories are kind of shoehorned and forced in there. But other than Han Solo and Princess Leia, I think this is the greatest handling of any love story in Star Wars. Duchess of Mandalore, it's not really good. I'm gonna put it in D tier as well. Um, it has some Obi-Wan and Satine moments which save it from being F, but really this arc could have ended at Voyage of Temptation. I never understood the point of this episode. It's just it kind of goes nowhere. Senate Murder sucks. That's F tier. Probably the worst episode we've covered so far. Um, and we'll get to this in season 3, talk a little bit more about the political episodes and how they can be good when done right. This is not one of them. They were going for like a murder mystery thing, but nobody cared about this Rodian on Wakanda Far. So it just really fell flat for me. And Padme was acting like really weird and out of character, if I remember correctly. I've only seen it a few times. It's a very disappointing episode. I usually skip it on rewatches. Cat and Mouse is a good episode. I'll put it in B tier. As a kid, I hated it because I was really done with the whole like space battle thing because they really relied on that a lot in the first 2 seasons, especially season 1. But looking back on it, Admiral Trench is a pretty uh, cool villain and different. I like the space warfare thing. Looking back on it, Anakin is showing what a great general he is in the war and stuff. This is probably the most Admiral Yularen was in any Clone Wars episode, and I liked him. Um, yeah, I mean just it was almost like a chess match between these two. So looking at it now as an adult, it's pretty interesting to dissect the inner workings between those two. Bounty Hunters is okay as an episode. I don't know where to rank it. But I think it's probably like D tier. It's actually not that good the more I think about it. I mean, Sugi is cool, and I liked her dynamic with Obi-Wan. It's fun to see uh, Hondo again, but the part I really didn't like about this episode was the Jedi training the farmers. That was really boring and took up most of the episode. Thankfully, it was just a one-off. The Zillo Beast is also going in D tier. This episode is really lame. I mean, the Zillo Beast looks cool, but um, it's just such a nothing episode. I don't even have anything to say about it. The Zillo Beast Strikes Back is a little bit cooler. There's a few things I like about it. I like just how insistent the Chancellor was on wanting to kill the Zillo Beast. He's an evil motherfucker, let me tell you. But the chase on Coruscant with the Zillo Beast trying to destroy everything was pretty cool. This episode's a little bit animated a little bit better than this one, so it's an alright little thing here. Death Trap is decent. I'm gonna put it in C tier. I mean, it's interesting to see just how tortured Boba Fett was after losing his father. You almost can kind of sympathize with him, but obviously he took his actions way too far, trying to destroy a Jedi cruiser. I always thought that Mace Windu did not have to behead Jango Fett. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, I understand Jango Fett was shooting at him, but once Mace Windu disarmed him because he cut either his blaster off or his hand off, he was defenseless. But then he just beheads him anyway. I mean, that is not the Jedi way. So I think that is just one example of many of how hypocritical the Jedi are. R2 Come Home is not really that good either. I'm gonna give it D tier. R2D2 is cool. He's a badass. Nothing against him, but this episode moves at a snail's pace, and it's. Oh, actually, I'm gonna put it a little higher, maybe at the top of D tier, because there's one great thing about it, and that's Aura Singh. She freaking carries this whole arc, if you ask me. They should have used her more. Jamie King is a very talented actress, and just the whole uh, aura, no pun intended, of Aura Singh is really cool. Lethal Trackdown is a really solid episode. I'm gonna put it in B tier, kind of higher B tier, maybe right about here. Actually, borderline A. The showdown at the end with Ahsoka and Plo Koon versus Aura Singh and Boba Fett was pretty cool, and just showing how cold Aura was, just leaving Boba behind. This is when things felt interesting, like they started to matter. Aura Singh killed Commander Pons. Um, it showed there was a little bit of good still in Boba Fett. I like that characterization. Um, Mace Windu was a dick in this episode, like always. But this was a really good and fitting finale, I feel. So, looking at it here, season one may have been more consistent than two. Going into this, I would have told you season two, but if you look at the rankings, now granted, there are three S tier episodes in season two, whereas there's only two in season one. But there's a lot more D's, but one less F. I don't know. I think after the Mandalore arc, or really after Voyage of Temptation, I can really take or leave anything else that came after that. Cat and Mouse is pretty cool. Lethal Trackdown's a great episode. But everything else, it just went on this streak of like not really good episodes, like Duchess of Mandalore, the Zillow Beast arc, Bounty Hunters, Senate Murders especially. R2 Come Home was kind of slow. It really fell off where I feel it had a strong beginning. Some of the Cad Bane stuff was really cool. The Geonosis arc was awesome and great for Ahsoka. The Grievous thing was intriguing. Then you had the Mandalore stuff, but it's really after that, like episode 13, that things kind of took a turn for the worse. So when I was a kid, I stopped watching Clone Wars like about 2/3 of the way into season three. Like the last thing I remember seeing is the like Overlords trilogy, the Mortis stuff, which I actually really liked. But I started getting interested in other things, and I really kind of just tuned out of Clone Wars. Season three had a really slow start. We'll talk about that when we get to that point. I might make a video soon doing season three and season four. Um, but yeah, so seasons one and two was what I was most in tune with and remember from childhood, and anything else for the most part, I've just seen like on rewatches of the entire series. So yeah, this pretty much sums up the list here. Wow, we kept it under an hour. Um, that's good. I got a little winded after the last video. It ended up being about 3 hours. But let me know what you think of this Star Wars: The Clone Wars seasons 1 to 2 tier list ranking. Leave a comment. Let me know what your favorite episodes are. I probably have some hot takes here, such as Rookies and Landing at Point Rain not being S tier. Having Hostage Crisis in S tier is probably a hot take. Um, Mystery of a Thousand Moods being an A tier. Some people will probably disagree with. Maybe Brain Invaders being S tier is a hot take. Zolo Beast being lower, I think some people might object to, but I think for the most part, all these other rankings are in line with what I've seen from other people, like either on Reddit or wherever else. All right, so that pretty much concludes the video here. I will be back soon for another tier list video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.